a historic ruling in Colorado.
The Colorado Supreme Court has issued a pretty big decision today,
Barring Donald Trump from the presidential ballot.
Crooked Joe Biden and the far-left lunatics are desperate to stop us by any means necessary.
Tonight, we're going in-depth on the landmark decision.
We've lived under polarization for quite some time. I'm actually very concerned about how this will all play out following the 2024 election.
How the political parties are responding.
It's a travesty. It's absurd and it's a miscarriage of justice.
he incited an angry insurrection to try to stop the peaceful transfer of the presidency.
What happens next? Well, thank you for joining us for Denver 7 News at 10 tonight. I'm Shannon Ogden.
And I'm Jessica Porter. The national spotlight on Colorado tonight after a historic ruling by the state Supreme Court.
Colorado's High Court ruled that former President Donald Trump is ineligible to appear on the state's primary ballot next year because of his involvement in insurrection.
It was a 4-3 vote, all 7 justices appointed by Democratic governors. This overturns a district court judge who found that Trump incited an insurrection on January 6, 2021, but that he could not be barred from the ballot under the 14th Amendment because it was unclear whether that provision was intended to cover the presidency.
A Trump campaign spokesman called today's ruling flawed, said they will quickly appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, which will rule, they say, in Trump's favor. He said, quote, Democrat Party leaders are in a state of paranoia over the growing dominant lead President Trump has amassed in the polls and are now doing everything they can to stop the American voters from throwing them out of office next November. Now, this is the first time that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment has been used to disqualify a presidential candidate from a ballot.
To talk more about the amendment and dig deeper into today's ruling is Denver 7 reporter and attorney Jessica Crawford. Jessica.
Well, I read through the court's opinion, and all throughout it, the court looks back at former President Trump's behaviors over time to give context to what his actions on January 6th might have meant, and that helped them reach their decision disqualifying him from the ballot. The court compared Trump's actions to Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. It bars from office anyone who swore an oath to support the Constitution and then engaged in insurrection or rebellion against it. Well, first, the justices found that the insurrection clause does apply to presidents, that presidents are officers, and ultimately that Trump engaged in an insurrection. Now, to engage, they said that didn't mean that he had to take up arms. They pointed to a tweet that he sent out in December of 2020 saying, statistically impossible to have lost the 2020 election. Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there, will be wild. The court said far-right extremists like the Proud Boys viewed that tweet as a call to arms. The court ruled that what happened on January 6th was an insurrection and that Trump's speech there was not protected by the First Amendment. The First Amendment doesn't protect speech that incites imminent lawless action. The court quoted that saying, fight like hell immediately before sending rally goers to the Capitol within the context of the larger speech and circumstances was not protected expression. I asked Ian Farrell, associate professor at Stern College of Law, to explain the limits of the First Amendment.
The expert testimony said that in the context of, for instance, these far-right groups, the words and phrases that Trump used would have been understood as a call for a violent reaction. And since Trump was calling for imminent violence, that goes beyond the protections of the First Amendment and free speech.
Now, if Trump's team files an appeal to the Supreme Court before the stay expires on January 4th, then Trump's name will stay on the 2024 ballot unless the Supreme Court says otherwise. And of course, like you guys said, they are planning to file that appeal.
Right. Jessica, several other similar lawsuits are filed in other states trying to keep Trump off those states' ballots. How is the Colorado suit different?
Well, Colorado's suit is different because they actually came to a decision. There were similar lawsuits in Minnesota and New Hampshire, and they were dismissed on procedural grounds. Meanwhile, Michigan Supreme Court might take up an appeal, but Colorado Supreme Court is the first to find that the disqualification clause of the 14th Amendment does apply to Trump.
All right, thank you, Jessica.
Jessica, nice work tonight. We appreciate that.
And one of the 3 dissenting justices, Justice Carlos Zamora Jr., said the ruling threatened democracy, writing, quote, "Even if we are convinced that a candidate committed horrible acts in the past, dare I say, engaged in insurrection, there must be procedural due process before we can declare that individual disqualified from holding public office. Procedural due process is one of the aspects of America's democracy that sets this country apart."
And though a legal ruling, the politics, of course, of this cannot be avoided. In reaction tonight falls along the expected partisan divide.
Denver 7's Colette Bordon with the political fallout of today's bombshell.
Our story starts here, January 6th, 2021.
We fight. We fight like hell.
Fast forward almost 3 years later.
The Colorado Supreme Court has issued a pretty big decision today. They found that Donald Trump engaged in insurrection and because of that is disqualified from the Colorado ballot.
Colorado's Secretary of State Jenna Griswold says unless this case is appealed to the United States Supreme Court and they decide to hear it, former President Donald Trump will not be on Colorado ballots.
What I would hope from the U.S. Supreme Court is for them to act quickly.
Colorado Republicans,
It's a travesty. It's absurd and it's a miscarriage of justice.
like Dave Williams, the chair of the state GOP, plan to appeal.
Donald Trump is a qualified candidate for the presidency, and he has every right to be voted on. And more importantly, all voters have a right to choose him if they want.
Williams says this decision has the power to unite Colorado Republicans.
A lot of even statewide politics, partisan politics, is national in nature.
Rob Preuss is the chair of political science at Metropolitan State University in Denver. He believes that if the U.S. Supreme Court takes up the case, Trump will likely end up on Colorado ballots.
The ballots probably doesn't mean much, but it's certainly going to fire up Trump's base. It's going to be one more point of evidence for a rigged election.
Saying 2024 will probably feel familiar.
In the realm of Colorado politics, I think what we're going to see is a continuation of the status quo. And so if you're sick of polarization and hyper conflict, I don't think you're going to see any relief from that anytime soon.
Stressing that whatever happens with the ballots, what matters is to use them.
But all that said, it's really, really important to vote and participate and be engaged, because once you drop out of that environment, then who's left? And that's exactly the polarized groups that folks are concerned about.
Colette Bordon, Denver 7.
We have extended coverage of today's ruling online. Read the full decision right now on the homepage of Denver7.com.